Everybody, it's Claire here from Sewing by Claire, and today we are continuing on with our series for Lilly Rose Dolls, and we are making our base character. So we've already made the body and we've made the legs. So body's here and the legs are here, and now today we're going to be working on the arms. Now I'm working to make a 16-inch Harvey character, which is Harvey the Hedgehog, who's here, looking very dapper in his lovely outfit, which we'll get onto in time. But for now, this series of generic videos is just to give you some tips and tricks for making your base character, so the body, the legs and the arms, on the majority of the clients at the time of filming, majority of characters are the same, so therefore you can apply these principles regardless of whichever character it is that you're making. So today we're going to move on to the arms, and then I'll be following on with the head, and we're not going to sew it all together until we've got our head ready, because I think you need the head on first and then to balance the character as we go down, and that's important because these characters are freestanding, so we need to have that centre of balance right. So just a quick tip there that we're going to wait until the end for that, but there will be a video for how to construct everything all together at the end. Okay, I'll tilt the camera down and we'll start making some arms. Okay, so we've got our two sets of arms here, and they've been put together so that we've got a left and a right for each set of arms, and we know that because we've got our pin in the top here, which we use to mark the right side. So we're going to work with one set at a time, and I'm going to put the two of the arms together. Now I am going to do the little slit in the top, which will give us the opening, because I do quite like that on the top there actually. So let's just fold our fabric on one part, so at the top of the bicep, so work out which is the top and the bottom. So I think they're fairly similar, but then fold it over at the top there and then put a little snip through there, and that'll just give us an opening. It's only about an inch, but that'll give us enough of an opening. Then take our pins out and lay those on top of each other. Match those shapes up as perfectly as you can, and then we're going to put our pins in at right angles to our seam that we're going to sew, and that will just then start to hold these together for us, which is what we need. And one more at the top just there should work, I think. And then we're going to take these to the sewing machine, and then we're going to sew all the way around because we've got the slit in the top here. If you're doing it the way where you leave a gap on the back of the arm on the seam and going to do a ladder stitch to close that, then all you'll do is do the same. Do your red pin trick so you know the gap that you're leaving between the two, so you can leave a gap open, and then you will then sew from one red pin all the way around to the other, just leaving a gap. But on this one I'm going to sew it all the way around. So I've got my machine set up, I've moved my needle across to the right so that I can use the edge of my presser foot to give me my seam allowance, and on these arms as well I've added a precise 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around on the pattern before I cut it out. But if you're using the stitching line method, then you're going to need to just pin your edges together on your stitching line, and then you're going to need to go round and tack that so you've got something to follow, and then you're going to sew directly on top of your tacked line. But if you did like me and with the pattern we've just added that 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around, then we're good to go, as long as we've got a marker to get it started with so that we know where we are. So I've got my fabric on the edge of my presser foot, and I've got my needle ready to go, and I'm using a Schmetz Microtex needle, which is my favourite ones, and this is an 80 I think, but you can use a 70 as well. So I'm going to take a couple of stitches forward, a couple of stitches back, and then I've got a button that leaves a needle in my work, so I'm then hands free now, because that piece of fabric is now tethered down to my machine. So we take a few stitches forward, I'll take my first pin out, and we're going to follow the edge of the raw edge of the fabric going all the way around the top here. We've got quite a tight curve to go around here and also around the hand, but we're going to manage that by pivoting. So use that needle in the work, and then we're going to start and go. So always make sure that you're on the edge of your fabric at the edge of your presser foot, and then you can turn for a little while, but you'll get to a point where you can't turn tight enough on your fabric. If you've not got an up-down button like I have, you can use your hand wheel here, your hand crank, in order to turn that, and that will allow you to put that needle in the work whenever you stop. Then all you can do with your needle in through the fabric and into your machine is you can then stop and then change the angle. So you only need a small change. I'm just showing you that you can change it however you like, but we just need that small change and do a few stitches and then change again, a few more stitches, and then change again and a few more stitches. And you're just trying to keep that curve lovely and smooth. You're trying not to have jagged edges around the tops of these limbs, just so they look nice and smooth. And that pivoting technique is something that I use all the time, whether I'm dressmaking or whether I'm sewing characters. So again, we're onto a nice gentle curve, so we can take that a little bit quicker. Coming back down here now, down to the bottom, so we've got to curve round first. Just make sure your raw edges are together or you know where they are. And then we can start and twist this round. So we go round until we can't really get much further, and then we can start and do our pivot line. And we want to keep to that seam allowance, otherwise you'll end up with one arm longer than the other. And that might be a look you're going for, but I'm not sure it's the look Claire intended, the designer. Okay, and I'm going to come around these stitches then and going to go back up onto the top here. And as I say, I'm going right to the top and then I'm going to reverse, but if you are leaving the gap, then you'll have just sewn up to your red pin and then you'll be able to stop that. And if you've not got red pins, just choose that a different colour is the one that you want to use. Okay, so I'm just going to do some snips through here, through the seam allowance. So we're going to do some little, this is just to help the curve turn through nicely. Just make sure you don't go through your stitches. If you do, just put your stitches, but your sewing back into the work, your fabric, and just go a couple of millimetres the other side and just do another row of stitches, and that will just reinforce it again for you. Don't think you've got to throw it away. And then on the top here, I am going to use my pinking shears here because that will just take off some of this seam allowance along the top and just allow it to sit right. You don't want to go too close because you want to keep the integrity of that seam intact. But just taking off some of that can just help it all sit nicely. And like I say, you can use those bits of felt to stuff your arms if you wish to. Zero waste. Okay, so then once we're ready with that, then what we're going to do is we're going to open up, go into our little gap there. Oh, I'll tell you what, no, this one, because it's long and thin, I've just remembered what I did last time, is if you pull the two sides apart, furthest away from your gap, you can start to tuck up the edge of the hand inside your arm. And what I would suggest you do is just gently ease that up. If you've got a turning tool, you can use that. But just start to turn this inside out first because it's so long and narrow. This is the 16-inch that I'm making, but I know when I made Clara, who's she's 10-inch, isn't she? Yes, 10-inch. Then you do just need to just do this very gently, and it is easier if you do it this way, I think, rather than you try and put your finger down it or try and turn it without having folded it in on itself first. So I'm folding it in on itself to give it a bit of a tube, and I'm always heading towards the gap. But this has worked quite well for me before. And you can use knitting needle or something just to go up into that tube and it'll help you. But because the felt tends to hold on to each other a little bit, there's not much, it's not like a silky fabric that's going to sort of slide against itself, then it can be a little bit difficult, but then all of a sudden it'll just come through the hole for you. And then we just turn through the top, the bicep through at the top just there. We can just give the seams a little wriggle and that will just help them stand out and just come out. You want the stitch line to be right on the very edge, but as we start to stuff these, then it will be easier as well. So let's just turn out where the hand is as well, just to make sure that that's all going to go right as well. Okay, so there we go. So there's our arm all ready to be stuffed. So I'm just going to get at the needle because I think I'll use the blunt, not the blunt end, the I'll show you when I've got it. I don't know what it's called. The end of a knitting needle, because I think that'll help push things down. You need something with quite a firm, blunt end to be able to push things down, because anything pointy could put a hole in your felt. So we just want to do that gently. Let me just get something. I'll be back to you. Okay, so I've got my knitting needle. So there's the pointed end, and then somebody's going to shout at me. What's that called? The stopper at the end? I don't know. That's the bit that's got what tells you what size the knitting needle is. But I'm going to use that side to be like a bit of a push to push the stuffing in. So we're going to start with some fairly small bits. Just open up your gap, and then you can start to use your fingers just to push a little bit in. And we're going to work in smaller bits, because that will be easier then for pushing it down right down to the end. It tends to get a bit stuck and congested if you've got too much. So once you've got a little ball, you can just hold on to your hand in the edge there, in your hand like that, and then you can just start to use that flat end just to poke right the way down into your arm. I'm just going to get a little bit more. And we're just going to build it up like that, and it will take a little bit of time, but it's just worth it to get a really nice finish on these hands and these arms. There's a little bit more in there, look. And then we'll just use that. And you can just feel it as you're going down. And it's lovely to see these characters come to life, isn't it? I know we're doing them a limited time, but already I'm getting excited to do my head and making the head for Harvey and seeing how his cute little face comes together. They do take on a personality of their own, don't they? And each one, I mean, Claire Bowman and Richard, who are the designers, have really got a stunning collection of characters here. There's so many that I'd like to make that over time we'll just work our way through them. So if you keep coming back to my channel for updates, then Claire and Richard have very kindly allowed me to bring these sew-along videos to you. And they're not going to suit everybody, but if you're a beginner, then I think just watching somebody else actually do it can make it a little less stressful and a little bit more, feel as if it's a bit more doable. So just make sure you're stuffing it enough to pull those that seam out to the edge. You don't want any folded in bits. And if you've not got a knitting needle, because not everybody has, then you could always use a chopstick, the blunt end of a chopstick, not the pointy end that you use with the food, but the bit you hold on to. That's got a nice flat end as well, hasn't it? Try and think of all these different things that you can use. Send your scurrying off to the kitchen to find whatever you can use. You could always use the edge of a teaspoon, couldn't you, as well? That's the other thing you could use. You've got a square edge on the end of a teaspoon. So again, we're going to stuff these really quite nice and firmly, but we want to be careful not to stretch that felt out too much. So just be aware of that the felt has got a little bit of stretch in it. We just want to keep that as delicate as possible. And just try and do this bicep bit. Maybe my slit is a little bit close to the bicep at the very top of the arm. I'll put a note in the video just to make your slit slightly further down. There is a slit marked on the pattern, isn't there? So you could always use the exact marks that Claire's intended. Okay, I think we're about there with that. We can always stuff in a little bit more at the end if we wish to. Okay, let me just get my needle and thread, and then we'll get this closed up. Okay, so I've got my hand sewing needle. I've got my thread double, and I've got a knot at the end. And I'm going to start up at the bicep, because I think as I work down, I'll be able to push a little bit more felt up into there. I think I've gone too close to the top here. So I will have put a note onto you so that on the screen, so that you won't make that same mistake. So I'm just going to do a couple of stitches in place, which just takes the pressure off the knot. And then I'm going to just start by pulling out the edges of the felt so I can see where they are, because remember there's no seam allowance on this closure. So we want to bridge the gap, not cinch it in really. So taking a little stitch across on the right hand side and then going across onto the left hand side. And then again, just move that stuffing out of the way so I can see the raw edges, that's better. And another little stitch just here. So I'm just going in about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the felt, just so that we've got a nice little bit were intact on the edge, and then we get this little bridge of stitches, and then when we've got a little bridge of stitches we can cinch that in together. It'll open up a little bit, but as you get further down then more of it will stay closed. Another little stitch there. That's better. Just using my finger just to indent that stuffing a little bit. Another stitch this side. Another stitch this side. I'm just going to work down each side of this opening just to secure those threads in place. To stop that stuffing from coming out. I can just push that in with my finger as we're going down. Making this look very cumbersome on video, but it is a simple process. Just want to make sure you've got a big enough bite in and out of your felt. And you can go up and down, remember, you can go across this gap again, just to make sure that it all holds together for you. And we'll snip off any little fibres that are showing through when we've finished. Use the edge of your needle just to push in any stuff in that wants to poke out. Oops, wanted to jump out of my hand. And when we finish this one, I'm just going to repeat the exact same process with the other arm, but I will try and make sure that when I make the other arm, that the slit that I make is going to be on the other arm, because I want these cut slit areas to be the side that goes against the body. That's my thought process, because they do feel just that little slightly bit flatter when you've done it that way, which does seem to give it a chance to go against the body. So if I show you this one that's got the seam down the back on the leg, can you see how that's curved at the top there? Whereas if we use this one here, it's got like a flat edge, which I think then will fit against the body better. So actually I'm a convert to Claire's way of doing it, to Claire Bowman's way, which is to use that slit to stuff them, which is interesting. But then there's always more than one way to do sewing, isn't there, and to make things. Different people have tried different things over the years. So I've got a bit of stuffing just sticking out here. So before I go back up again, I'm just going to keep my thread out of the way, and I'm just going to snip off that bit of stuffing, those stuffing fibres close to the edge, without going through my stitching thread or without going through the felt. Take it off nice and flat. And then I'm just going to do another row of stitches, just going up again, just spanning that gap. I can just go through both sides at the same time now, and that will actually keep all of that together for us. And once I get to the top, then I'm just going to do a couple of stitches in place. I'm going to do that surgeon's knot that we spoke about before. I'll just show you just quickly if this is the first video that you've watched, but we used it on the legs as well. So I've just gone through up to the top there. So I'm going to take a little bite of my felt, and then I'm going to wrap the thread coming out of the body around twice, not the thread through the needle, the thread that's coming out of the body twice. Keep my finger on it, so hold the thread, the wraps really close around the thing, and then pull tight. That gives a really nice tight little knot. And then I'm going to go right in by there with my needle, angle my needle down into the character arm, down there. Can you see where it's coming out? Hopefully you'll get a glint of the needle just there, and then I can push on that and pull it through. That gives us a nice long tail so that it's not going to unwrap. And then if you just pull on it slightly, when you snip that thread, it'll pull the thread at the end, pull the thread back into the character's arm, and so it gives you that nice long tail that's unlikely to unravel then. And you've got that all buried in. So yes, there's definite indentation there, which I think will help that stitch onto the edge of the character quite nicely. So I am going to make sure that when I do my next arm, that whichever one is going to be on the top, I'm going to make sure that that's on the slit is going to be on the other side. Okay, so I'm just going to make the other arm exactly the same, and then I'll come back to you and we'll round up. And so if everything's gone according to plan, you've got 2 arms. And your arms should be approximately the same length and the same sort of thickness as well, so they're as even as possible. And we've got those ready to attach onto our character. So I would pop those to one side along with your legs and along with your body, because we're going to be sewing those together in a later video. So we're going to do the head first so that we can get that on, and I'll attach. So too many words at one time going through my brain, sorry. We're going to make the head first, then we'll do one video where we attach the head and attach the arms and the legs all in one go. So the next video that you'll see from me will be how to make a head, and this one is going to be for Harvey the Hedgehog, but you will go on to the separate video for whichever character you're making, and over time they will build up. So it might be when you watch there might not be your character there yet, but you can still watch the ones that I have done that are similar to yours and just see what tips and tricks you can pick up there for making your head. But then once you've made your head, you can pop back to these generic videos then, and then we're going to construct all of those all together. Okay, I'll see you soon. Have a great day everybody, and happy stitching. Bye.